Join me tonight on Twitch at 10 p.m. Eastern after the conclusion of the playoff game, where we'll talk about everything that happened this week in the NFL. And join me Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern to play some live NFL trivia for a chance to win cash prizes. Link in the description below. And now, on with our feature presentation. December 24th, 2016. The Los Angeles Rams are taking on the San Francisco 49ers at the LA Memorial Coliseum. Now, this is a completely meaningless game. The Niners enter this one at 1-13, and the Rams enter at 4-10. Both teams are mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, and most of the fans in the stands are probably more concerned with what's going to happen tomorrow on Christmas rather than the actual action on the field. However, prior to this game, in front of an announced crowd of over 83,000 people, the torch at the Coliseum is lit by this man right here. This is Dennis Harrah, and he was a Rams legend who was one of the best offensive linemen of his era. He receives a warm embrace from Rams fans, who are happy to see him and are happy to have their team back in Los Angeles after more than 2 decades in St. Louis. And he seems to embrace the fans back, as he waves to them and looks happy to be there and hears their cheers and applause. Which is a far cry from what happened at Super Bowl XIV, when he flat out said how much the fan base sucks. Yes, imagine if just days before you're set to playing the Super Bowl in front of your home fans, a player on your team is telling you how much you stink. That's exactly what happened prior to Super Bowl XIV with the Los Angeles Rams and Dennis Harrah. And this is the story behind the bizarre controversy. Before I talk about the incident in question, we need some context to understand the frustration on both sides, both from the fans of the Rams, as well as from Dennis Harrah. And to say that off the field, the 1979 season was a bit of a tumultuous one for the Rams would be an understatement. In 1978, it was announced that the 1979 season would be the last one that the Rams would be playing at the LA Memorial Coliseum. After spending 3 decades in that historic venue, they were going to be moving to Anaheim and play at Anaheim Stadium. Now, while this was still technically Los Angeles, it's about 40 miles from the Coliseum to this stadium in Anaheim. It wasn't as though the team was moving across the country, but this wasn't just building a new stadium in close proximity to the old one. Many Rams fans were hurt by this move, and it reflected heavily in the attendance figures. With the Rams being somewhat of a lame duck team, they struggled heavily to fill the 92,000-seat Coliseum. At times, the stadium was a ghost town, and of their 8 home games, all 8 of them were blacked out. The Rams' average attendance in 1979 was a mere 52,970, meaning that, on average, only 57% of the seats at the Coliseum would be filled. Only one game drew an attendance of 60,000 people, and that was their Week 8 game against the San Diego Chargers, where they lost 40-16. You can probably guess why that game drew the only respectable crowd of the season, and that's because it was a Chargers home game. Don't believe me? Take a listen to this play where Pat Hayden gets sacked, and just listen to the roar from the crowd, keeping in mind that this game was taking place 120 miles away from San Diego.
Receivers to the right, 3rd and 9. Smith in motion, Hayden to throw. He's in trouble. Grabbed by the jersey, and down he goes at the 12-yard.
This would be the last time in Rams history that a visiting team from California took over their stadium. The Rams' attendance in 1979 and their fan support, or lack thereof, was shockingly bad. To put their paltry attendance number into perspective, here's a look at all of their attendance figures from 1970 on, which was the first year of the post-merger era. You can pinpoint the moment that things went south, and their attendance nosedived after the Anaheim move was announced. The numbers were at their lowest, and by a fairly comfortable margin, in over a decade. And for the fans that did show up, they would constantly boo their team, with the Rams infamously being booed off of their home field following a 29-14 loss to the New Orleans Saints on the final day of the season in their farewell game. But the most frustrating part about the lack of fan support, in the eyes of Rams players, the team was actually winning games. Now, were the 1979 Rams a great team? Absolutely not. They only finished the season with a 9-7 record. They only had a point differential of +14, which was the worst of any team in the 10-team playoffs, and they ranked 13th in a league of 28 teams in that category. And they got blown out, which I'm defining as a loss by 3 or more possessions, in 4 games. However, despite their struggles at times, and despite the fact that after 11 weeks, they were sitting at 5-6, they found a way to make the playoffs. They even had a thrilling overtime victory against the Minnesota Vikings, which put them in pole position to be the NFC West champions. You can learn more about that crazy game by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And despite many people considering the Rams to be the worst team in the playoffs, since they had the worst record, had a defense that was not inside the top 10, and had an offense that was in the bottom half of the league in points scored, they shocked a ton of people when they were able to make it to their first Super Bowl in franchise history. For the first time since 1955, when they played in the NFL Championship, they were set to play for football's championship. After stunning the heavily favored Dallas Cowboys 21-19 in the divisional round, and after shutting out the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 9-0 in the NFC Championship, they were one game away from hoisting the Vince Lombardi Trophy, and doing so in their own city, as Super Bowl XIV was set to take place at the Rose Bowl. After the Rams beat the Buccaneers down in Tampa and made the late cross-country flight back, when they arrived at LAX, they were greeted by a wild and enthusiastic crowd of, well, absolutely no one. A mere 2,000 people showed up to congratulate the Rams on this accomplishment. For some perspective, earlier that day, the Houston Oilers lost in the AFC Championship to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and 30,000 fans showed up to the airport to greet them. And this was after a loss. The Rams had just made the Super Bowl, and no one could be bothered to greet them at their airport, even though that seemed to be fairly customary, and still is. And for guard Dennis Harrah, this was the last straw. Because when it was time to speak to the press to get ready for the game, he wanted to make his message extremely loud and clear. Rams fans were awful. Before describing what specifically he said, there's two important things to note. Number one, Harrah was not the first person to publicly express how the fans in Los Angeles are not good leading up to the big game. In fact, longtime viewers of the channel might remember that this isn't even the first time I did a video on a Rams player calling out the fanbase before this game. A while ago, I talked about how starting tackle Doug France called out the fanbase, saying before the game, "We are not trying to win the title for the Los Angeles Rams, because we don't feel we belong in Los Angeles anymore." He then added, "Maybe we have some loyal fans in Los Angeles, but they sure as hell don't show up on game days. We're going to try and win this game for ourselves and nobody else." To learn more about that comment and what he said, click the card in the upper right corner. And earlier in the month, backup center Dan Ritschek spoke glowingly of the Buccaneers fans. Granted, he played with them for 2 years, but he never spoke highly of Rams fans in the press. Ritschek flat out said, "Their fans are the best in the NFL. You never have to worry about getting reservations to restaurants or tickets to a show. They're unbelievable." And number two, this was not the first time that Harrah was calling out the fanbase. The Super Bowl just seemed like the straw that broke the camel's back. He was drafted by the Rams in the first round of the 1975 NFL Draft, and didn't exactly have the best relationship with the fans. Back in 1976, after a Monday Night Football game against the San Francisco 49ers where they lost 16-0, lost their undefeated record, and allowed quarterback James Harris to get sacked 10 times, Harrah criticized the fans for booing, saying, "I'm so embarrassed. 80,000 home fans booing him. That's what makes me feel bad." Earlier in 1979, he lashed out at the fans for booing their poor play and for not showing up, saying, "A lot of guys say they don't hear the crowd, but that's a bunch of bull. You do, and it hurts." But he went further. He said, "I like to see smiling faces, and all we see anymore is angry people yelling obscenities. It makes you look forward to playing on the road. You go someplace like Denver or Oakland, and the fans are great. Right now, we're not getting any support at all." And just in case he didn't get what he was trying to say, he added that during a game, Giants punter Dave Jennings asked how anyone could even play for the Rams under these conditions with how bad their fans were. Harrah added, "All we've got left is 45 players and the coaches. I tell you, this boat is empty. It's tough when you've got to pull the oars all by yourself." Safe to say, he was not thrilled with the Rams fans. And with one more game coming up in Los Angeles for the Super Bowl, after lashing out at the press for not respecting the Rams, he made sure to save his harshest words for last, and directed them toward the fans, because he wanted to let the fans know one more time just how bad they were. Criticizing your own fans before you're set to play what essentially amounts to a home Super Bowl, which was the first time ever that a Super Bowl was played in the home market of a team in the game, is a bold strategy. But Harrah figured at this point he had nothing to lose. He was furious and fed up. And even though he could have framed the situation like, "This is where we're really going to need your support, because even though it's been rough, now that we're here and so close to winning it all, we want you guys to be loud and proud as we hopefully leave Los Angeles on a high note," he did not do that. Not even close. He doubled down, tripled down, and just kept digging and emphasizing just how awful the fanbase was. As Harrah said before the game, "We were glad we didn't have the home field advantage during the playoffs. We were glad to be away from our terrible fans." Harrah would have rather traveled across the country and had to work under a silent count than stay at home. That's how little he thought of the fanbase. He then said that should the Rams win the game, he doesn't want to see the fans celebrating, because they didn't earn anything, and how dare they be happy at this team. He said, "It will be ours to enjoy. Ours and nobody else's. We won't have to share it with anyone, because we were the only ones who cared about us. Everyone else gave up." And if that wasn't bad and harsh enough, don't worry. He continued to throw more fuel onto the fire. He basically said that the lack of positive reception at the airport after the Rams got home from Tampa was embarrassing. He said, "The Houston Oilers lost to Pittsburgh. Their season is over, and they still had 30,000 fans meet them at the airport in Houston. We beat Tampa Bay. We're going to the Super Bowl for the first time, and we barely had 2,000 people meet us at the airport. Now can you see why we want to leave LA? Harrah was burning every bridge in the book as the team was ready to play its final game. You guys stink, we're glad to be leaving, and you deserve absolutely nothing. As for how the game worked out, well, let's just say that much like the fans all season, the Rams could not get the job done. I've talked at length about Super Bowl XIV on this channel before, and have tons of videos on the subject. If you want to see the most recent one, which involved the absolute disaster that took place at this game from a parking perspective, where the Rose Bowl only had a few thousand spots available for over 103,000 people because rain flooded the other lots, click the card in the upper right corner. However, when all was said and done, the Steelers won 31-19, winning their 4th Super Bowl in 6 years and sending the Rams to Anaheim on a bit of a whimper. It was a pretty good game, and for 3 quarters, it looked like the Rams had a legitimate shot to pull off arguably the biggest upset in NFL history at the time since the merger. But in the end, the Steelers proved to be too much to handle. As for Harrah, well, he was a really good player. This wasn't some random scrub who was criticizing the fans. Harrah, despite his initial problems with the organization and its fanbase, played his entire 13-year career in Los Angeles, playing with the team all the way until 1987. He made it to 6 Pro Bowls, was named a first-team All-Pro in 1986, started 144 games for the team, and is widely regarded today as one of the greatest offensive linemen in the history of the Rams organization. And when the Rams moved back to Los Angeles in 2016, he was genuinely thrilled. He said on the move, "I'm excited about the fact that they are finally home. I couldn't be any more excited with them coming back to me. It's wonderful. It was like a bad divorce for so many years. And now, it's like we were getting back together." Man, how things change. Because those were definitely not the thoughts that Harrah was having back when the Rams were last in the heart of Los Angeles. Today, this incident is just a mere footnote in his storied career. Because again, Harrah is loved by Rams fans, and is somewhat of a team legend. But it's probably not the best idea, whether you're Dennis Harrah or Doug France or anyone else, to criticize your own fanbase and tell them how awful they are. The optics look terrible, and no matter how right you think you are, telling your fans to ram it in a non-cheesy 80s song context is not a good look. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot, and be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes, link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9. If you want to see college football videos, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.